All right, so Ken, start with what exactly you're getting from officials over there about this trip.
I'm getting nothing, Katie. The FBI has not responded to inquiries asking for context about this trip or even whether they're pushing back on this Politico reporting, which we have no reason to doubt. But look, if this is going forward, this is absolutely astounding. Chris O'Leary can tell you about the time years ago when the FBI was trying to cooperate with the FSB, the Russian Domestic Intelligence Service. But that was then. This is a much different situation. That was before the Russians tried to interfere in our election, and they've been doing it ever since. And we have lots of intelligence that suggests that. That was before the Ukraine war. I mean, Russia is our foremost adversary. I mean, you can argue whether it's China or Russia, but Russia certainly appears to have more bad intent when it comes to the United States. And, you know, the FBI is one of the agencies where intelligence analysts believe there's a chance that Russia may be behind these attacks, or maybe anomalous health incidents that some people believe are attacks on American intelligence officers abroad. So there's so many reasons not to do this, and it's not clear what the policy benefit is, and there are a lot of risks. As Chris and John can explain, anytime an American official goes to Russia, there are huge, huge risks, Katie.
All right, so Director Brennan, let me play devil's advocate. What would be the reason for someone like KASH Patel to go to Moscow?
Well, it's an excellent question, especially plans for a trip that's not going to take place 3 months from now. I traveled to Moscow twice when I was CI director with very specific purposes. One was to complain mightily to senior Russian officials about the harassment and maltreatment of U.S. diplomats at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. Second time was to talk about foreign policy issues involving the Middle East and carrying White House and presidential messages. So frequently those trips would take place, at a time when there is a need for having a senior level dialogue taking place between the two countries, even though tensions might exist between the two countries. But so I don't know what it is, but KASH Patel, as we all know, I mean, there are real questions about his competence, his integrity, and so many things. And given the concerns that we have across the board about Russia, about what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in terms of our election integrity, there is just, I guess, a whole host of questions that I think are in people's minds right now about why KASH Patel is going to both Moscow and St. Petersburg just a few weeks before the November election.
What if the FBI director's next foreign trip isn't just another diplomatic visit, but one of the most controversial national security stories of the year? That's exactly the question exploding across Washington right now. According to reports, FBI Director KASH Patel is expected to travel to Russia just weeks before a critical election, a move that has stunned former intelligence officials and sparked intense debate among lawmakers and national security experts. Supporters may argue it's simply diplomacy. Critics say the timing couldn't be more controversial, especially given the long history of tensions between the United States and Russia. So why is this trip raising so many alarms? What are former CIA and FBI officials warning about? And why are intelligence veterans saying the risks extend far beyond a routine overseas visit? In today's video, we're going to separate facts from speculation, examine what has actually been reported, and break down why this story is dominating political headlines. Stay with us until the end, because one revelation about this trip could completely change how you see the controversy surrounding it. Let's get into it.
So, interestingly, when KASH Patel was nominated as FBI director, Julia, Russian state TV celebrated him as the incoming director. What a great group coming in with Trump. Maybe not on Ukraine, but they will deconstruct America in half an hour. Like KASH Patel, for example. He is fire. He is handsome, tremendous. This is after they played a clip of Patel saying he will upend FBI operations. What is the reaction, or tell us what that means? Why do they like KASH Patel so much? Julia.
Well, I think they like KASH Patel. Yes, I think they like KASH Patel for the same reason that they like Donald Trump and everybody else who came in with him in 2024, which is that they saw him as the wrecking ball. I remember in 2018, I went to the NATO summit in Brussels, and I ran into a former advisor of former President Dmitry Medvedev. And I said, this is Trump 1. And I said, hey, so how are you guys seeing Donald Trump? Like, how does he come across to you? And this guy said, give me a line I'll never forget. He said, he's a wrecking ball, but he's our wrecking ball. And I think that's how they see all the figures, or they used to see all the figures in Trump's orbit, as auxiliary wrecking balls, as it were, that would take a hammer, take a wrecking ball to America, their greatest enemy, from the inside, and do far more damage than they ever could, the Russians ever could, from the outside. I think things have changed in how they view the U.S. in the last year and a half, and how they view the Trump administration. But for me personally, the first thing that came to mind when I saw the news that Kash Patel, however handsome Russian state TV thinks he is he's a party boy. And Moscow, St. Petersburg, these are big party cities. And as former director Brennan can tell you, that's when a lot of problematic stuff can happen in terms of compromising.
Whoa, hold on a second. Did you hear what they just said? The director of the FBI reportedly travelling to Russia just weeks before a major US election. That's not the kind of headline Americans are used to seeing. Whether you support Kash Patel or oppose him, this is the kind of story that immediately raises questions. And those questions deserve answers. Former intelligence officials are openly debating the timing, the purpose, and the potential risks of such a visit. Some argue this could simply be part of legitimate diplomatic or law enforcement engagement. Others believe the optics alone are troubling, especially given the long history of tensions between Washington and Moscow and repeated concerns about election interference. And here's what really grabs people's attention. When experienced former CIA and FBI officials publicly say they have concerns, Americans naturally want to know why. Are these concerns based on national security, politics, or are they simply expressing personal opinions based on their past experience? This is exactly why stories like this spread so quickly online. The facts are still developing, but the public debate is already in full swing.
You get to own that. Liz Oyer is still with us, along with former U.S. Ambassador to Russia and MS Now International Affairs Analyst Michael McFaul. Ambassador, Politico notes, we don't know if Patel would meet with Putin or any of his top aides. We don't know what the agenda would be. Just start us off by talking about the level of work necessary to adequately prepare someone like Patel to meet with anyone affiliated with the Russian government.
Well, first, it hasn't happened in a long time. The last FBI director to visit was there when I was ambassador in 2013. That was Robert Mueller, and he came for a very specific purpose. I want to emphasize this. Mm-hmm. He came just a few weeks after there was this horrible terrorist attacks during the Boston Marathon. They were people that had lived in Russia before, and he came to work with his counterpart, the head of the FSB, that's the equivalent of the FBI in Russia, and they did cooperate. I want to emphasize, this is a long time ago. They helped us with that investigation, but it was for a very concrete reason that he came to Moscow. And the initial question I had when I read that reporting, what's the purpose of this trip? Because if the only purpose is to meet with his counterpart, by the way, it's the same guy, Alexander Bortnikov, a very, very experienced person close to Putin, and it's just to stand next to Bortnikov, that's a win for Russia. That's a photo op that says we're normalizing relations, we're all great powers together, and to give him that, I hope that we would get something in return that is valuable to American national interests, and I'm just not sure what that is.
It also seems worth the reminder, Ambassador, that in the past, Patel has tried to cast doubt on investigating whether Trump or his allies colluded with Russia to help him win the 2016 election, an episode he now calls the Russiagate hoax. Could that come into play here on this trip?
Well, I hope not, because the facts are overwhelming. In fact, the same Robert Mueller I just talked about published hundreds of pages showing what the Russians did in 2016. The Trump administration just published literally just published last week, very compelling evidence of what the Russians did in the 2020 election, particularly involving Hunter Biden and Burisma and all these rumors. They themselves said that was the Russians. So I think it would be extremely awkward for him to walk into that, especially with Mr. Bortnikov. I don't think he'll meet with Putin. I would be very surprised by that. But Bortnikov is the head of the FSB. That's the KGB, the former KGB. That's literally the organization that gets involved in meddling in elections abroad. That's also the organization that is helping the intelligence to support Putin's war in Ukraine.
Did anyone else catch that? Because if what was just reported is accurate, this isn't just another overseas trip. It's a story that could dominate political headlines for weeks. Think about the timing. Just weeks before a major election, reports emerge that FBI Director KASH Patel is expected to travel to Russia. Immediately, former CIA officials, former FBI officials, and national security experts begin asking questions. Not because talking to foreign governments is automatically unusual, but because timing matters, optics matter, and public trust matters. And here's what makes this story even more explosive. Nobody seems to have a clear explanation yet about the purpose of the visit. That uncertainty has created a vacuum, and whenever there's a vacuum in Washington, speculation rushes in. Some people are already calling this routine diplomacy. Others believe it deserves much greater public scrutiny. So which is it? That's exactly what millions of Americans want to know. Because Russia isn't just another country in US foreign policy. For years, it has been at the center of debates over cybersecurity, intelligence operations, election interference, and international conflict. Naturally, any high-level meeting involving senior American officials is going to attract enormous attention. But here's where I think this story becomes even more important. It's not simply about one trip. It's about transparency. It's about accountability.
KASH Patel has been bungling every investigation, and partly because he thinks he's going to be famous by tweeting about it. But that's led to a series of disasters where he humiliates himself. Fun for everyone. Anna, tell us about it.
It's not fun for the American people when our FBI director seems more interested in posting online as opposed to carrying out investigations that are incredibly important to carry out. And the latest investigation has to do with what federal authorities are referring to as a foiled plot to carry out a mass casualty event during that weekend when the UFC fights were taking place at the White House. Now, we have some details about that foiled plot. I'll get to that in just a second, but here's how KASH Patel potentially hurt the investigation. So federal authorities are alleging that they foiled this plot, which involved drones and snipers and all sorts of crazy stuff. It turns out that Patel failed to follow certain legal constraints, including the FBI's own disciplinary code, by prematurely disclosing details about the arrests and the investigation before it was allowed to happen. Now, there's a very real reason why these rules exist. It's an effort to not tip off other potential individuals that could be suspects, people who might get arrested. On social media, Patel posted details about the 5 arrests in this investigation that were carried out in conjunction with the Secret Service. On June 16th, 2 days after the White House cage match. You read that right, the White House cage match. Patel revealed in an early morning tweet that 5 men suspected of planning to attack the event with drones and explosives had been stopped cold and praised the rapid action of the FBI, our partners, and the Department of Justice in a multi-state operation. And it was a multi-state operation. Some of the suspects were in California, others were in Nevada. I mean, pretty crazy story. But the problem, as The Guardian reports, according to several law enforcement officials involved in the case, was that the investigation was still ongoing and agents were still actively searching for additional suspects at the time Patel shared his post. In fact, so 5 people were initially arrested, suspects. After Patel had posted about it prematurely, federal authorities were able to arrest 2 additional suspects.
Whenever a senior US official makes a high-profile visit, especially to a country like Russia, it is bound to attract attention. That's true regardless of which party is in power. In situations like these, people naturally ask, why now? What is the purpose? What outcomes are expected? Those are reasonable questions in a democratic society. At the same time, it's important to distinguish between confirmed facts, reported information, expert opinions, and speculation. The transcript we discussed includes commentary from former intelligence officials expressing concerns about the timing and potential risks of the reported trip. Those concerns reflect their professional judgment, but they are not by themselves proof of wrongdoing. History has shown that diplomacy, intelligence cooperation, and law enforcement contacts can continue even during periods of significant tension between countries. It has also shown that these engagements are often closely scrutinized because of the stakes involved. That's why transparency about the purpose and scope of such visits can be important for maintaining public confidence. For supporters of KASH Patel, the criticism may look like another example of political attacks against an official they believe is trying to reform the FBI. They may argue that critics are reading too much into a routine trip before all the facts are known. For critics, however, the timing and context raise legitimate questions that they believe deserve clear answers. They want to understand why the trip is taking place, what its objectives are, and how any potential risks are being managed. Those two perspectives are very different, but they share one common point. People want information they can trust. In today's media environment, headlines spread within minutes, clips go viral in seconds, and opinions often form long before all the facts are available. That makes it even more important to slow down, examine reliable reporting, and avoid jumping to conclusions. Whatever happens next, this story is likely to receive close attention from lawmakers, journalists, and the public. If new information becomes available, it could either answer some of the questions being raised or generate new ones. Now we'd like to hear from you. Do you think this reported visit is a routine part of international law enforcement and diplomacy? Or do you believe the timing and circumstances justify greater public scrutiny? Share your perspective in the comments below, and please keep the conversation respectful and focused on the evidence. Civil discussion is far more productive than personal attacks, and hearing different viewpoints helps everyone better understand complex issues. If you found this analysis useful and want more fact-based coverage of major political and national security stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest updates. Thank you for watching, thank you for your support, and we'll continue following this story as more information becomes available. We'll see you in the next video.